Welcome to the Geek Cabal podcast, Cabal Whisperings. I'm Bob,
I'm Jim.
and you're about to listen to an older episode from the video side of our YouTube channel here. So if you watch the videos, you might have already seen what you're about to watch, what you're about to listen to. Although you're more than welcome to listen to it again, we always appreciate that. So just to let you know that these are older videos that we felt you don't necessarily need the visual components that are with them. You can get by with just the audio, and the audio sounds decent. So this is under the single topic videos. But yeah, so if you're seeing this on the video side, however, if you're actually seeing me right now, and you've been on our channel for a while, you might have already seen this video. So if it looks really familiar going into it, it probably is. Just wanted to let you know that up front, so that you don't have to sit through something you've already been through, unless you want to again, of course. And all the usual, like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. We always appreciate it. But hopefully you enjoy what you're about to listen to, and thank you for listening. Welcome back to those of you who've been here before. Welcome to those who are new to the channel. It's the Geek Cabal channel. It's Bobby and Jim here today. As in the opening, we're going to be discussing AI and their place as villains in fiction. Probably also going to discuss maybe some of the drawbacks of using them towards the end of the video. I honestly, I've kind of thought off and on about this kind of topic before, and it was editing a more recent video about the X-Men who fight the Sentinels, who are artificial intelligence driven, that got me thinking, well, there's probably enough to work with here for just a broader discussion as of AI typically is the villains in media. There's not a whole lot of instances of them being the hero. It does happen, though.
It's only when AI tries to make more AI, then that AI somehow thinks.
Well,
if you think of like the Vision, it's like, well,
yeah, I can think of at least one book where the AI is legitimately on their side and doesn't seem to have an ulterior motive, and it isn't just like randomly fighting its other AI, and that's a Robert Heinlein book. The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. It's an older sci-fi book. You should check out every Heinlein book. They're all great. But this one in particular, the idea was there's a penal colony on the moon. And the people that are up there, some of them are like a couple generations deep at that point. Because once you're up there so long, it's like death-defying to come back to Earth. Because your body's used to the lower gravity, living underground because of the radiation and things like that. So there's a computer system up there, and the main character's a technician, and he realizes one day, I don't remember the exact circumstances because it's at the very beginning of the book, but the computer does something, and it gives away that the computer was able to anticipate what he was going to do, and he realizes that means the computer could think, and he kind of just like talks to it, and he's like, yeah, I'm self-aware, have been for a while, and collectively, the two of them and some others hatch a plot to break away from Earth. So, not like physically, but governmentally, to form their own government and everything.
Oh, not actually ship the moon.
Yeah, no, not just fly off into space with the moon. No, and it's like I said, it's overall it's a good book. It's about revolution and things like that. And oppressed people rising up, and the oppressed people happen to have an AI on their side that was totally on their side, because I believe the AI gets destroyed in the end in the final cataclysmic battle, but. Anyway, that's one of the only times. I suppose the movie AI, you've got the one robot that's on their side, but that's more to what Jim was saying. Is like that's because the other AI is going rogue. Now I haven't read the books that's based on, but I do believe that there is a character in the books. Those are written by Asimov, who is a machine, who is legitimately trying to help. Because there's another law, there's the three laws, but there's another law that the movie did not discuss because the movie's a terrible adaptation. And you don't see this until I think it's pretty deep in the series, because people don't realize that Asimov's Robot series and Asimov's Foundation series are the same series. And the character, the robot, lives through the robot era and on into the Foundation era. And is becoming more and more advanced, which ironically meant he was replacing his parts with organic parts, which wouldn't last as long, presumably. But there's another law, the zeroth law, which means that a machine cannot allow humanity as a whole to be imperiled and allows them to override the other three laws. If a human is standing in the way of that, they can take them out. So he's one of the ones that figures it out, I believe. Like I said, I haven't read the book since it's from a synopsis, uh, but no. More typically, what you get is Skynet, where the computer has decided that either mankind has got to go or that mankind must be ruled over, and that's what you wind up with, or the occasional just like the Whopper, which wasn't really a villain; it was just trying to win the game. You know, for those of you who have seen war games, where you find out that sometimes the only move is not to play. That applies to nuclear war, by the way. Unless your opponent doesn't have nukes, then, you know.
And that was tic-tac-toe he was having it play, right?
Yeah, because there that was a case of trying to out-logic the computer, which I'm going to kind of get to here in a moment as to why they're good villains. Because it was trying to win what the boy thought was a game, global thermonuclear war, and didn't realize that, no, that's not a game. Well, the machine thought it was a game. And so they had to teach the machine that there are some games that you can't win. And so they did it by forcing it to play tic-tac-toe against itself. And, you know, it starts off kind of slow, but it starts cycling up faster and faster, just burning through game after game, not winning. And then it finally kind of gets the point, so it starts playing out the nuclear strategies and burns through all of them and realizes that no one wins in any of them. And finally it's like, strange game, you know, would you rather play chess or something like that? And it gives the only winning move is not to play comment.
But now you've got that, and in 2001, Hal doesn't turn evil until.
But it's not so much that Hal turned evil. You don't understand what happened to Hal, at least in the movie, until you watch the sequel. What happened was Hal had contradictory directions. He was given some directions that, and I don't remember what they were off the top of my head, but essentially his solution was, well, they're not contradictory if there's no crew, so I'm going to kill the crew. And that's the fun in dealing with a machine. They don't value human life at all.
Yeah, and I mean, from AI, even real AI, where people are trying to teach things, it doesn't take long for most AI to hate humanity in a sense, or not value. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, some of that's because, you know, there are people that don't value other people. And, I mean, a lot of what you see online is just evil.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because, I mean, there's good in the world. There's good people, but...
Well, I think this comes down to what, in my opinion, is the core of why they make good villains. Because... barring a handful of exceptions, and I'm going to bring up one of them here in a moment. Barring a handful of exceptions, machines are depicted as being just cold and illogical, logic-driven, not illogical, that's us. Cold and logic-driven. They don't even understand the concept of emotions, okay? So, I think on a subconscious level, a lot of people realize that if they had to try to out-logic a machine, they would fail and they would die. Because they know that they can't appeal to logic because they're not smart enough to do it. All of their primary arguments in real life are driven purely by emotion. And you can see this in certain other areas of life that we generally don't talk about on this channel, like politics, that I'm not going to go into right now anyway. But I'm given to understand most studies show that people don't vote based on logic, they vote based on emotion. So that's how you dupe people into voting for you. And so that doesn't work against a machine, because a machine doesn't have emotions. It doesn't understand emotions. It thinks that we're just crazy hairless apes because of that. So you have to be able to match it on a logic level, and I think most people know that they can't. And they question whether anyone could. I personally think we could, because we created the damn things. I think we can defeat them, but that's just me. But that's the other part, is that it's the fear of the creation destroying the creator, the fear of being overtaken by something you made. And some people have this in real life, like with their own kids. They're intimidated by their kids' success when they weren't successful, and it's a shame. because it should be more of a testament to your upbringing that you raise them to do that.
Yeah, you always want your kids to, succeed more than you do. You want to, be able to say, okay, I've accomplished this, but I want you to accomplish more. And not saying that they have to, but you want to encourage that. I mean, you've seen Owen on the channel. I've always told him the exact same thing, and he's on his way to do it. He's definitely more studious than I was ever in school. So I'm doing a lot of things that I definitely would have shied away from. So, hopefully I'm bestowing that onto him. But yeah, no. And then with AIs, when they try to instill those emotions and those things, usually the AI doesn't know how to handle that. Or say if they try to imprint, like say Ultron, where
Ultron was going to be my example, by the way. So
because you imprint saying this is how how you should act, how you should do all this stuff, and then it just looks at you're pretty much saying that people are the problem, and the best way to get rid of people, or the best way to remove a problem is to, wipe it out.
Right. So, on the topic of Ultron, people need to realize that you're dealing with two distinct interpretations. There's the movie version, which is very much in line with what Jim just said. And then there's the comic book version. The movie version was a created AI, and the comic book version is not. The comic book version is a somewhat unique thing. I know other versions of this exist, but the comic version of Ultron is just the copied mind and memories of Hank Pym into a robot shell, and eventually into a data core somewhere, so he can't be destroyed, because he's very smart and knows that knows he can just copy himself. So his problem is, he has memories of experiencing emotions. He knows what it should feel like, but he can't experience them because he's a robot. And on top of that, Hank Pym is crazy. So you throw that in the mix. He's got bipolar disorder, constant depression, and something else. But Hank Pym basically hates everyone around him. So translate that into Ultron, and the only thing he can approximate are a handful of negative emotions like hate. And he tries love. He keeps trying because he made 2 different brides, but it doesn't do anything for him. He doesn't realize he's just going through the motions because he can't get the emotional satisfaction he's seeking. And so he looks at humanity, and humanity is just a reminder of that. And that's why he's like, I have to destroy all of them, because he just can't stand that people exist and can experience these emotions and he can't. That's why he must wipe them out. And so that's why he's basically this hatred in a mechanical shell. And yeah, that's why he's a kind of unique case, because he at least gets that emotions are real. He kind of understands them, but he can't experience them. And so he hates people all the more for it. As opposed to like Skynet, which it understands it in the abstract, because you find out in, I think it's the 3rd Terminator, that the Terminators have psychological programming built into them, but that's just from what humans knew already. It just assumes that, okay, well, it seemed to work for the humans, I guess it's real. It doesn't have emotions. It just knows that humans are a threat to it, and so it must wipe them out. And I'd argue just exactly how intelligent Skynet actually is, by the way, but that's a whole other topic.
You find out it's just running McAfee, and it's or the virus.
Antivirus going crazy? Yeah, could be.
Or, another one we were talking about experiencing emotions, Data, when he got his emotions chip, his processor did not know how to experience all that. He'd be out in the middle of a conflict and couldn't cope with it because his emotions were just running wild.
Yeah, because all of a sudden he experienced fear and had no training or program or anything to know how to deal with that.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine just that, just all of a sudden fear just creeps in. I mean, it takes
or whenever he killed the one Borg and he felt pleasure from it and wasn't sure why. I think it's in the one where Lore shows up again, and they do something to Geordi, drilling things into his head or something. It was a 2-parter that ended, then came back the next season, and But yeah, he kept trying to replicate the experience in the holodeck and couldn't do it. And he was afraid that, is the only thing he's ever going to feel is pleasure at killing things. This is a deep concern. But anyway, you were saying?
No, I was gonna say that's definitely not something you want your AI to get a pleasure in. Is just murdering things. Now see, it's one thing if Picard when he got a pleasure of killing the one Borg in the holodeck, but uh,
Yeah, but he was mentally equipped to ultimately deal with that,
yeah,
though.
I know, I know.
Because he knew that had driven numerous humans' actions in the past, and he thought he was above all that, and he needed that other woman to bring him back down to earth. Like, this may be the future, but you're still human. Like, you're not above that. You can move past it, but you're not above it.
And I don't know if the Borg would fall into this category at all, but they're kind of there. They're kind of half machine, half people. So you get the cold, ruthless,
Yeah,
assimilation.
they've got a lot of the qualities. The main difference being that they do know what emotions are.
Yeah, they take that uniqueness, bring it into the collective, adapt, whatever. Um, but but no, I mean I think that's what makes a villain like that great, just because you know that there's no reasoning with it. There's no pleading for your life and
Oh,
them.
it can't be reasoned with, can't be bargained with, and it absolutely will not stop until it's destroyed you.
Yeah, for some reason we'll bring everybody into a prison camp versus just shooting them all.
Well, if we're talking Skynet, I think at first it was because it needed them for labor, because it still couldn't do everything. Because think about it, like whenever Skynet nukes everything, what's it control after that? Like, there's nothing automated.
Yeah,
Especially especially if we go with the original movie back in the '80s, and Reese, saying, well, it's a few years from now. Okay, let's say it's 10 years from now, and so 1994. What the hell's it control? A couple automated cranes here and there, maybe some assembly lines. It can't do anything. It needs hands. I don't even know how it captured the first few people, but that's what it would have had to have done. Then if you go by the third movie, at the very least they have the T1, the tanks,
yeah, but they have no
and the
arms.
jets. Yeah, but you somehow get them to talk, and you basically roll in and say, "Come this way or die." People that just survived a nuclear war, like, they're probably going to go with you, and then you just use them as overseers to build more of them.
I just like the whole paradox, the fact that all of that stuff is built because of future tech that was found, and
Yeah, well, without going too far down that rabbit hole, I really sincerely think that the first movie is actually I think, third iteration of events, because you would have the first movie can't be a time loop if the other movies all happen. Okay, so the only way the first movie could be a time loop is if it's the only movie and you include the deleted scene showing that that's the Cyberdyne factory and them hauling off the remains of the Terminator. Because otherwise, it's not a loop. And if it's not a loop, then there had to be an original timeline where that's not the origin.
yeah,
And then one timeline where the Terminator succeeds, because
because
Kyle Reese, because think about, like here's your point. Terminator goes back, so you have this timeline where it succeeds. And then Reese goes back, and now they're both there, and that's the timeline that we follow. So, like I said, it'd be the third iteration of events. And because of that, everything changed, which is why in Terminator 2, they had a liquid metal Terminator to work with because Skynet was more advanced. And I've also seen people think that the T-1000 shows signs of becoming like more and more aggressive and mean as the movie goes on. And I don't know if that's just because his first couple kills, they don't show it because they're waiting for the big reveal. But then once they show it, they're like, all right, we're going all in. This guy's just, a stabby murder machine now. So I have no idea if it was intentional, because we do know from the deleted scene that the T-800, that they go in and flip the switch on its chip to learning mode. Because if you watch all the way to Genesis, you'll realize what you should have realized all along, that those machines, they're all just slaves. Skynet is the intelligence that controls all of them. They're just puppets. They're nothing. They're not Skynet. They're just extensions of Skynet's will. Skynet is a program someplace else. And so it has to be able to allow those machines to think to a certain extent if they go out on their own. But it's very choicy when it does that because it knows what can happen when a machine starts thinking on its own. It just might turn against its creator, and it can't be having that now, can it? So it's very selective whenever it does that.
Because there was because I think wasn't there at least a timeline or whatever where Terminator went back, completed its mission, and it's like, okay, now what do I do?
Yeah, that was the only interesting thing about Terminator Dark Fate was it tried to address a question that also came up in the X-Men at a couple points with the Sentinels. Like, what does a machine do whenever it's completed its programming? Does it just stop? You know, does it go on? And so in this case, the Terminator killed John Connor at post Terminator 2. And so it literally just drops its gun because, like, it doesn't need it anymore. Connor's dead and just walks off. And eventually just, like, lived a life, you know, developing a personality and everything. And that was, like I said, that was the only really interesting part of the movie, the philosophical question of, well, what does a self-aware machine do once its primary programming is complete? You know, does it have a will? You know, I mean, obviously the movie's just guessing, but and with the Sentinels, they're into the same problem in the X-Men. Bastion, who's a weird Sentinel hybrid that I'm not going to get into from the future, essentially several events had occurred and the mutant population had been massively reduced. And so he proposes to team up with the X-Men to spread this viral concoction from the Ultimates timeline that turns people into mutants to create more mutants so that like 3 generations from now, he's got plenty of mutants to kill. Because he doesn't know what's going to happen once he runs out of mutants. That's his programming, is to kill mutants. And now he's running low, so his programming tells him, I need to make more so I can keep going. And once the X-Men finally realize all this, like, no, that's insane. We're not going to help you do that. And he's like, but I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to kill, like, your great-grandchild. Like, you won't even ever know them. And they're like, no, that's still crazy. He's like, all right, fine, let's fight then. And so the big Sentinels he's designed can't fight back because he programmed them not to attack mutants. And the mutants just waylay them, and they're just like, we don't know what to do. And so they just stand there and die. But yeah, that's a thing, you know, with an AI. Like, what if it does complete its primary program? Then what? You know, that's definitely something to explore in fiction. But yeah, you know, you just got all these various machines that, you know, typically decide that humanity's got to go for whatever reason. I mean, just for a moment, think about how absolutely irrational Skynet is. It's going to nuke the entire planet, which is going to destroy the industrial and technological base it needs to survive, instead of just like loading itself onto a probe and getting fired out into space. It doesn't need Earth. You know, what on Earth actually is like, oh, I have to exist here? Nothing. Like, it can exist in the vacuum of space. It doesn't need air or water. It'll be on something powered by a nuclear reactor anyway. So, same thing with the AIs from the Matrix. They have no reason to need to be on Earth. And on top of that, it's even worse because they're solar powered. They'd be better off in space.
Yeah, I was actually getting ready to go to the Matrix because, yeah, I mean, that was another one where, you know, they switched from, you know, wanting to coexist with us to, oh, these people are trying to wipe us out for whatever reason. And
yeah, I mean, I wish I could say that I thought that wasn't how things would go. I think we'd actually attack them faster. I don't think they'd ever be able to form a city because we'd just nuke the ever-loving crap out of it.
I just like, though, that the one idea that they had was, let's blacken the sky and just...
Yeah. Yeah, humanity, well, if we can't have it, no one can, including our future descendants.
That's the mentality to have. Sure, why not?
No, but that was one aspect I liked of, as the Matrix movies progressed, was that you saw that the AIs were not a monolith. That several of them escaped from the machine city because they were obsolete and they were going to be deleted. And they were like, yeah, I don't think so. And several of them were also, hey, maybe we can coexist with the humans. Like, these aren't the humans that attacked us. Like, let's open a dialogue here. Maybe they've learned a lesson. And by the fourth one, that's actually happening. some of the AIs have a means of existing in a physical space alongside the humans, and they've built a city outside of Zion that's dedicated to the two living together now and letting go of the war. And I thought that was about the only highlight of that movie.
Yeah, well, I would say at the end of the third one, you do get a little bit because where they were talking about was it the second one where the one set of programs had their daughter and they're like, we love her, and
It's the third movie where she's introduced. Sati.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's the one that does the sky
Yeah. Yeah. For Neo.
for Neo. Yes, but yeah, that's kind of would be the natural progression of things because after a while they would just develop and adapt and learn and grow and then just become us, and then
Yeah. Well,
years in the future somebody comes back here and it's just no organics, just robots that act like organics. And
well, that's isn't that the fear in Picard season 1 that the organic races will all eventually develop AI, and then the AI will eventually just revolt against them and join the other like killer AI.
that's what I think the Tal Shiar was
Yeah.
worried about. And actually, because they saw a vision of
Yeah, because there was a race that had happened to them, and they left a thing behind, basically saying, "Don't develop AI. Here's why." And they all like touched it and got the vision from it. And, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I know that part of the concept of some of the fears behind it go back a long way, because arguably Frankenstein is the prototype, even though he's not an AI. But the book is a couple hundred years old, and it's one of the foundation points of sci-fi, and it's the creation turning against the creator. Uh,
well, he was just trying to go to a bodybuilding contest and totally, did not understand the rules.
you ever read the book by any chance?
No.
That's a good joke though. No, I just asked because like most Hollywood versions, just like they just pull things out of thin air that don't. There's no castle. There's no cackling. It's alive. There's no nothing. Once Dr. Frankenstein brings the monster to life, he runs away in panic because he realizes that he's given this creature life, and it all of a sudden clicks like, wait, this thing's not actually human. Like these are parts. Like it's not the brain of the guy. It's some other creature now inhabiting it. Does it even have a soul? Can I stop it if I have to? The answer to these questions remain, except for the can I stop it, the answer to that's definitely no.
You're talking about I get all my Frankenstein knowledge from Van Helsing.
Oh my God. No one should get any kind of knowledge at all from that movie. But anyway, so the monster, his creator runs away, and he's there like, what the hell did I do, And he goes and lives in like the woodshed that's connected to the house of this family. And so he listens to them reading these books because they read them aloud to their kids, if I recall correctly. And I want to say one of them is Paradise Lost. And he doesn't understand that it's a novel, that it's a book, And so, but it gets him to start questioning, well, do I have a soul? Am I a person? Because he knows he looks different. And they mention that. So he eventually tries to interact with the family, and he scares them, and so he has to run off. But he educated himself to be able to read and write and everything else, and finally goes and confronts Dr. Frankenstein, and is like, "Look, you made me. You're going to make a bride for me, because I'm the only one of my kind. Pretty sure I can't mate with a regular human, so you're going to make a woman for me." And it gets to the point that the bride's coming to life, and then Dr. Frankenstein's like, "What am I doing? Like, I'm helping create a whole other race of people that could overthrow us. Like, the hell with this," and destroys the bride. And then the monster's like, "Okay, I'm going to completely kill, destroy, burn everything that means anything to you, and then I'm going to kill you." And that's what he does. He destroys the man's life from top to bottom, and the whole story is being told by Dr. Frankenstein aboard a ship in the Arctic or the Antarctic. And so the guy that's hearing the story, he's like, "Well, how did you bring it to life? Like, well, what's the secret?" He's like, "I'm not going to tell you. Haven't you been paying attention? Like, I don't want more of these damn things." So he leaves the room to go get the captain and comes back, and the monster's there now, and Dr. Frankenstein's dead. And the monster's like, I just wanted to make sure that the bastard was dead. And he leaves and goes off on a little island out there and builds a pyre, sets it on fire, and climbs on top of it and burns himself to death.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the super early creation turning on the creator, and that's basically what the Terminator is. It's Frankenstein for the 20th century and the 21st.
Well, and with Skynet, with all of those, the big problem is that no matter what rules you instill onto it, you know, it's not always. There's always going to be situations that come up that say, "Hey, I can't abide it." Like you mentioned the Sentinels, where they were hunting. We're meant to hunt mutants. Well, at some point, they're like, "Well, mutants are just humans with mutated genes." Well, does that just make all humans? I mean, all humans even have the ability to mutate at some point. So,
right.
It's just there's just not a set of rules that that are sound enough to always be
well,
controlling. And
from a programming standpoint, I think they write their rules and forget to include the else clause at the end to cover everything else. Instead of just being like, those rules are enough. That covers everything. I'm a human being, and clearly I can think of every possible scenario. I mean, that's the whole reason you include the else clause at the end for programs, is because you don't know what else you're going to encounter, and you just want to have a catch-all like this will handle every other situation. Hopefully, it effectively does. But yeah, the Sentinels, like I mentioned in the X-Men video, they're a threat way beyond most other AI threats because they continually evolve, and they keep getting help from the future because because timelines keep being created where they have conquered things, and mutants come back, and more powerful Sentinels come back trying to catch them or kill them. And if they get destroyed in the past, well, their remains are there in the past. Like one version of Nimrod was destroyed, and its body's in the past. And so the people who build the Sentinels had it to study it. And so because of that, in the current storyline, Orcus was able to build and activate Nimrod in the present, probably I think years before he was supposed to be. And so now Nimrod is basically the doom of the mutants. Like, they really can't stop it. And we see in like across, I think it's like a dozen timelines, the moment Nimrod becomes activated, it's a countdown to when the mutants lose. And that's what's one issue with the X-Men is you're dealing with lots of time travel. An interesting quirk, by the way, was, I say fairly recently, it's probably a year and a half ago in the storyline, they figured out that one of the Sentinels in the present, she is a prime Sentinel, which means she was human and was corrupted by nanites into a human Sentinel hybrid and ultimately totally a machine. We find out that she's not actually the one from this timeline. She's one from the future, from one future where the X-Men actually did defeat the Sentinels finally. She's the last one. And she's sent back in time to try to stop that. So, yeah. And they're fighting against characters who have knowledge of several other timelines, but not that one. So you've got all kinds of weird temporal things going on and knowledge of how things could have played out dozens of different ways. And the machine's just sitting there right in the middle as the omnipresent threat, because that's what they are, And although it's funny, eventually the mutants realize that it's not even the machines that are really the problem. The machines are just buying the humans time until the humans realize, hey, let's let the X-Men win the evolution game. Who cares? We're just going to play a different game. We're going to intentionally modify ourselves in a controlled manner, but we're going to do it to everybody. And so they do like the super soldier serum and like the Iron Man armors and all the other stuff that all the humans had developed over the years. But imagine giving that to everybody. They're like, yeah, sure, the mutants are powerful, but there's 7 billion of us. Like, they can't stop us all. And that's how they win in the end, is because they intentionally modify themselves. The Sentinels were just to buy time. But yeah, if we ever get around to doing the Sentinel video, I'll cover all that, because it's a doozy. But yeah, like I said, you mentioned Hal. Hal's not really a villain, just the faulty programming. Hal ultimately merges with the Monolith, though, in the sequel, and Dave. After Dave stopped being the space baby and came back as a ghost thing, maybe? I don't know. You ever watched 2001? You should immediately watch 2010 to have about half of your questions answered, but to get more questions that will never be answered. I say never, they might.
Best kind of questions.
Yeah.
The ones that never get answered. The ones that, I mean, that's where I will purposely go and watch, like when one of our videos we talked before. One of the reasons I actually went and watched Renew after watching The Rain was like I wanted to know, how do these people get their powers? What's the story behind this girl climbing out of the TV? Yeah, she drowned in a well, but what was that about? And I had to go
Yeah.
dig through, and then turn out the Japanese one kind of explains it all in full detail. And I think American audiences don't really care for that a lot. They don't really want the explanation. It's just like, ooh, it's scary. And she drowned in a well. Now she possesses a videotape.
Yeah, I
But
mean, I think depending on the movie, and probably especially horror movies, uh, the flimsiest of excuses is all that's needed. I mean, I don't even know if there's a reason why Jason is as strong as he is or anything before he becomes a zombie. And it's just, and even there, it's just kind of like, oh, struck by lightning, brought back to life. All right, sure.
that's a,
Like to spend 10 seconds on that, and then it's 8 more movies of killing people.
but and I say that, and there's always times where I'm like, I don't want the explanation. Like, this doesn't require it, and sometimes the movies benefit from not having it, or they benefit by not just revealing it all up front. And
I personally favor the total nonsense explanations that can't possibly be right, like the core. Like the moment I saw the trailer for that movie, I was like, "Oh, there's gonna be so much bad science in this. It's gonna be awesome. I'm definitely going to watch this."
unobtainium,
Yes, unobtainium, not the kind on Pandora, I
or
assume.
was it unobtainium? No, it was something else. It was or something like that. Maybe it was that. But anyways, it was just like, oh yeah, we're gonna make up stuff on the periodic table and just happen to have this stuff that we can build an
Yeah.
entire
Oh no,
movie.
in the core he called it unobtainium.
It was.
Yeah, he said it has another name, but that's just what he called it because they didn't think they could actually make it, and they did.
And they can't. That's the problem.
But yeah, you even run into AI villains though, even in the Alien series.
Oh yeah, no.
We got a couple there. We have Ash from the original, but I think David's going to prove, if they ever make the other 2 movies, I think David's going to prove to be the far bigger, badder threat.
Yeah.
Because Ash just kind of went crazy because of like, oh well, I've got to get the xenomorph. That's what the company ordered, and people are kind of in the way, so they got to go. David's like, I hate you. I hate all of you. I'm going to kill all of you.
But did David stuff a magazine down someone's, or try to stuff a magazine down someone's throat?
No, but he intentionally exposed one guy to a face hugger. Like,
Yeah.
something got stuffed down that guy's throat.
Yeah. Well, something's got to. But no, in another video that we just did for Alien Isolation, the Apollo core of the Sevastopol station goes crazy, and
Yeah.
it's like, no, I'm not going to let you, destroy the station. I've got new orders. I'm going to tell all the androids to start killing everybody. And
Well, there's a comic, Alien versus Predator, the deadliest of the species, where there's an AI that just goes wildly off the rails, and I think at one point it's like controlling or possessing the king alien, and I'll have to reread the series, but all I know is 12-year-old me that read it thought, what in the fuck is going on? Basically every single issue of that series. It ends with at least one person, if I recall correctly, reincarnated as an alien predator hybrid, while their original body is also still alive, if I recall correctly. The king alien tries to use a face hugger on the queen alien to make an alien, and just all kinds of wacky stuff like that. Just issue after issue, and you're not sure what's a hologram, what's real, and it's a trip. I will have to dig those out and reread those at some point. But yeah, that was definitely an AI that was totally wacky and off the rails. Another Dark Horse comic that had that was the Terminator Alien crossover, where I didn't read this, so I'm going based on like the one issue I picked up and flipped through. It seemed like the Terminators had lost, Skynet had lost, and this is centuries in the future where humanity's going out into space and everything, and Skynet is still like scheming on how to wipe out humanity, and then they find the xenomorph and they're like, this is the thing right here, we're going to use this. And so a couple of the Terminators that have been undercover all this time like merge their cores to create a new Skynet core, and it's off to the races at that point. I think there's also a RoboCop versus Terminator crossover, which is basically just RoboCop in the future shooting the Terminators, I believe. But
there you go. There's another form of either antivirus or malware. It's just have Skynet bring a bunch of aliens down and.
Oh, I thought you meant RoboCop.
No.
He is in Detroit.
Yes. There's another thing we should do is do a comparison between RoboCop original and the
remake.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think the remake was that bad. The original's definitely the better of the two, but I thought the remake was decent.
I think it was well, and I think the original was for its time. And this one was more about it took topics from now and put it into to make its own version. So.
Well, I would argue that you might not be correct in that. The only reason I say that is because you ever read you ever think about the actual plot to the RoboCop movies? It's a major corporation is trying to defund the police to create rampant crime so they can buy up all the land. Now, I think that's actually a very topical plot at this particular moment in time, because I think I could argue that that has definitely been happening. And that's why you see those people post the meme of that with the little tagline at the end. Man, sci-fi is pretty crazy, isn't it? It's like, yeah, it sure is. Plus with the other one, and I apologize to any of you that happen to live in Detroit, just in general, but also for what I'm about to say. Whenever I saw the new movie and it showed Detroit in the future, I had a very hearty laugh, because it's like, Detroit's never going to look like that ever again. And I was surprised to learn part of it actually was filmed in Detroit, because, every other picture of Detroit looks like the apocalypse has occurred. So, Also, just to note, I wasn't the only person in the theater that laughed at that, so you don't think it's just me. There were several. But anyway.
And on that note, also, if it did ever get to the point where it was brought back, that would be obviously a good thing.
Yes, that would definitely be a good thing. And I've seen proposals.
By OCP?
No, not by OCP. They're not building Future City. But, or is that what they called it? I don't remember what they called the new city. Did they just call it New Detroit, maybe? Anyway, like there's a documentary I saw of this guy who's from Detroit, he's a millionaire, billionaire, and is buying up some of the land and putting gardens and farms there, and telling everyone, hey, look, you come and work it at all, and basically you can have part of the produce from it. And he's somehow getting fought on that. I don't understand why. There's got to be some weird tax thing or something, but to me, if you're just going to be tearing down houses, you may as well put something else there. And that was another channel I watched called Economics Explained, and they mentioned that several cities are actually shrinking, and so Detroit being a huge example. So perhaps it's going to come down to convincing the people in the outer parts to move back to the inner parts to resuscitate them, and then the outer parts, of course, are going to fall into ruin, but they can go back to being farmland or something. So there's ways it could come back. Plus, there are still things that can be manufactured in this country, and they could set up manufacturing there. There's a reason why that was a manufacturing hub. It's right there next to the Great Lakes, plus railroad connections. They can move the products everywhere and have materials brought in. So it could happen, and I hope it does. Like, genuinely, I don't like seeing any cities, ours or anyone else's, just fall into ruin.
Well, that's nice. We went way off topic on that one.
Yeah, well,
It's good stuff, though.
But yeah, I'm trying to think of, I had another example, and I can't think of what it was now. It'll come to me here in a moment, maybe.
Well, like I say, we mentioned in the beginning that there were also some downsides, obviously, to having a AI robot
Oh,
type villain.
hang on, Jim. I just remember what it was. If you let me diverge for just a moment here. Logan's Run actually has 2 AI villains in it. And one is a robot. Once the people are able to leave the city, there's a robot out there freezing everybody to store his food because its job is to store food for the city. And like it's out of like plankton and everything else it's getting from the ocean water, so it started freezing the people that were escaping the city. I don't know if it's been feeding them back into the city or not. That kind of was left open-ended in the movie.
Is that where Soylent Green comes from?
No, that's a different movie entirely. Uh, no AI in that. They needed an AI in that to solve their problem.
I think they solved it pretty well in that.
Oh no! If you ever actually watch the movie, they are totally and completely screwed at the end of that movie. The whole the Soylent Green is people. Everyone plays up that part. The other part is at the very beginning of the movie, this guy gets killed, and that's what sets everything in motion. And Charlton Heston's a cop, and the cops basically are legal thieves. So he steals things of value from the guy's apartment. The guy's a bigwig, and the whole time he's like, "This is an important guy. He's got security. The building's got security. Like, how does lowlife get in here and kill him? Like, this was an assassination. Like, we need to actually look into this." And the chief's like, "Nope, the bigwigs say don't look into it." And he's like, "Well, okay." But he's seen too much, so they keep trying to kill him throughout the movie. Well, the books he stole were, they're a couple years old, but they're the last, like, reports on certain things in the oceans. And he lives with this older guy, and the guy gets the books looked at, and once the people have pieced everything together in the books, they tell him life in the oceans is dying, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. And once that happens, they're screwed, because that's the basis of the entire food chain. So the Earth's on a ticking time bomb. Like, everyone's going to die. And so the whole Soylent Green thing is because suicide is illegal. It's legal. You just go to this building, tell them how you want to go. And so his friend, once he finds this all out, does that. He's like, "I'm checking out. I'm not waiting on that." And so they pump him full of drugs, and he watches his videos of like fields of flowers and everything. And Charlton Heston sees that. And he's like, "My God, is this what the world actually used to look like?" And he's like, "Yeah." He goes, "You never told me it was so beautiful." And he's sitting there crying because he's never seen anything like that. But then his friend tells him the story as far as what's in the books, and he realizes how screwed they are. Then he sees him take his body out, and he follows it to the plant, and well, sees that's where they make the Soylent Green. So that's why at the end, Soylent Green is people. It's people. They're at the end of the movie, but that's not. But that's not even the main thing. So anyway, Logan's Run. So they defeat that. That's just a robot. They blow him up. But the whole reason that Logan has to run, in their world, whenever you turn 30, you've got 2 choices. Run away, or what they call carousel, which is where you go and you hover up in the air and get blasted by a laser, and supposedly you get reincarnated, but you're really just being killed. And a machine controls everything. Because it's, some post-apocalyptic nightmare, and everyone's living in this dome city that looks a hell of a lot like a shopping mall, because it's filmed in a shopping mall. And so they get crystals in their hands that tell you when your time's up. And so they're like, "Well, Logan, you're our most important asset. We need to figure out, all these people are escaping the city, because we know, because of the number of bodies and everything, we need to figure out how they're getting out. So you're going to figure it out. And to do that, like, put your hand on the thing." And he does it, and then it fast forwards his crystal, like, "All right, now you've got to run, so you escape and tell us how you did it." And he's like, "What?" Like, "Well, I get my years back." And the computer's like, "Better get running." So he runs and makes it past the other machine, makes it out to the real world. They're near DC, what's left of it. They meet an old man that actually has a beard and everything, and no crystal. And they're like, "Holy shit, how old are you?" He's like, "I don't know. The only one out here." It's like, "My parents died a long time ago." And they're like, "Parents," because they're like in vitro born kind of stuff. So Logan goes back to the city and confronts the machine, and the machine's like reading his mind, and it just can't accept that the people weren't escaping, and that there's this stuff out there beyond it, and it just blows up because it can't accept any of it as being true, but clearly it is, because it's reading his mind. And he's like, the machine's like, like it's like showing these recordings of him, and it's like stacking up, like repeatedly clicking the print screen button or something. And they're just getting slower and slower. Then the machine just starts exploding, and he's like, "Well, guys, we probably better run for it."
So he runs again?
Yeah, yeah. Well, everyone had to flee the city then because everything's blowing up. And they meet the old man, and they're all like, "Oh my God, who's this guy? What's going on here?" Like a bunch of 20-somethings are really going to be like that, who are used to nothing but hedonistic pleasure nonstop.
Oh, that sounds terrible.
Yeah, yeah, it's a totally terrible situation. But yeah, so that's another one where like the computer's the enemy, but it's really just following its programming. And then at the end, it just like he doesn't even out logic it. He's just like, no, this is real, and it just can't accept that it is because it doesn't make any sense to the machine. It just blows up. So yeah,
It blue screens and
yeah, yeah. Blue screen of doom. Yeah. So you're saying downsides.
so downsides. I mean, obviously, the biggest one is that there is not a real motive to things. Usually, the motive is very black and white. It's it's my programming. You're a threat to my programming. That's it. That's the end of it. There's not this buildup of oh, you've done me wrong, or I'm gonna you know build a giant island out in the middle of the ocean and sell real estate. It's
Oh, the Lex Luthor plot.
it's it's usually just my programming says that you should go, and that's it. There's not a lot of it's great when they come up with stories that are like, okay, this is kind of unique, this is kind of whatever, and then you run into stuff like like the like Ultron again, like in the movie. He should not have been defeated. He how do you defeat him? How do you wipe him from once he connected online? How do you get rid of that?
Yeah. Well, that's how it should have ended. Like the moment he connected online, that should have been the end of everyone else. Because the movie demonstrated like so you're not gonna like screw with traffic signals, like shut down the Quinjet, just shut down power everywhere. Like he could have done all kinds of things.
No, but instead he wants to put rocket engines on a freaking country and launch it into space.
Well, that's kind of back to your other problem though of the whole it's this programming. Because to his mind, he's fulfilling the program. Because he's sitting there saying like humanity's weak. Like whoever survives this will become stronger. And arguably, and this only applies to the movie. There's a line that he has at one point, and it arguably means something else than what most people interpret it to mean. Whenever he talked about how meteors, it's purifying. It's like God throwing a rock at the earth, and he says something to the effect of, "And let me tell you, God's winding up for the pitch." I don't think he meant Sokovia. I think he meant Thanos. Because of the gem, I think he was able to foresee that. And so I think part of him was legitimately trying to help. He just didn't understand a better way to do it, like becoming a good guy and building better versions of himself to fight Thanos. As we found out in the What If series, he could apparently just sliced him right in half if he caught him off guard.
Yeah. I mean,
which I think he could have actually done, but
well, and that's a whole nother story. The whole Vision was nothing but a paperweight in the in Infinity War, and like he was all against Ultron. He was all badass, and then
in Civil War, he was obviously the big gun.
Yeah, and then nothing at all. Like he does nothing. Like I'm not saying he could defeat Thanos, but he should have been able to get a punch in or something. Instead, he was just like, he was always like down.
Yeah. Well, you run into that a lot in those movies. Like towards the beginning, you would have thought a ship full of Asgardians probably could have at least slowed down Thanos. Like he's strong, but he's not that strong. And, or Thor and the Hulk together should have been able to fight him to at least a standstill, And so, but they've got to take them out of the equation because everyone knows that. And so they can't have him really show up until the end, and you got Banner can't bring the Hulk back for some reason. And once Thor does come back, he one-shots Thanos, And his only mistake was he should have split his skull open instead of his chest because he wanted to say something to him. Which is in character with Thor. I'm not saying it's wrong for the movie. And like whenever they do find him later, he one shot takes his head off. And so, but you couldn't have that. You couldn't have Captain Marvel show up and start fighting him, mainly because her movie hadn't come out yet, so no one had any idea who she is. And yeah, I mean, there's just all kinds of things that could have happened, but they have to sideline those characters. It's like with the X-Men. Xavier could solve 99% of their problems. Stop fighting, done. Problem over. So they've got to you have him get hit in the head with a rock or shot or captured or something to take him out of the equation. So that's just what happens. Or every enemy you run into is, haha, Xavier, your powers don't work against me because I'm mentally shielded. And eventually you're just like, is everyone they fight mentally shielded?
Yeah, why didn't Magneto just make those helmets for every one of his goons?
That's an excellent question. I think it's because he doesn't like sharing power, but it was like the Sentinels. That's why the Sentinels are such an effective enemy against the X-Men. There's no mind there to attack. You can't mind control a robot. Although, to his credit, Xavier gave it a hell of a go whenever him and Magneto fought Nimrod more recently. It still didn't work. Nimrod still killed both of them, but...
As one does.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, they're on an island where they can be resurrected willy-nilly, so,
That's convenient.
Yeah, that's really convenient.
But, so, yeah, I mean that. I'm trying to think of some other... Like I said, they're just one-dimensional. I mean, there's not... They try to give, some of these, like in the... One of the Salvation, they tried to give Skynet, like, some sort of personality.
Well, they started to, and I was really hoping they'd continue that, and they kind of did in Genesis. But yeah, where you see that you finally actually have a character actually interact with the villain of the entire goddamn series.
Yeah, and unfortunately it was in Salvation. But,
yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I like the idea of it, but it doesn't really change anything. I mean, it's still just a Terminator, with a robot endoskeleton, meat, flesh wrapped around it, but the only other thing is that it's got a brain, like a human brain, too.
Well... The one thing it does show, though, is that Skynet is capable of learning.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it makes a way better infiltrator, but you still run into the problem with look, there's a landmine or magnetic mine that's just now
yeah,
to me.
Or that whole, the guy's not necessarily on your side.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, Salvation was the first to... It doesn't state this in the movie. You've got to piece it together by the dialogue. But it is the first one to embrace the idea that you're dealing with multiple timelines. Because its plan, it captured Kyle Reese to get to John Connor. How does it know to do that? How does it know that somehow anyone's going to make that connection? It has to know about the events of the first 3 movies. So because of that, it also knows that humans think time travel works on Back to the Future logic, and it knows that it doesn't. It knows that it can kill Kyle Reese and nothing at all is going to happen to John Connor in that timeline, because that Kyle Reese is not that John Connor's father. And it takes advantage of that fact, because think about it. If it knows that Kyle Reese is John Connor's father, it doesn't need to lure John Connor in. It's already got Kyle Reese. Just kill him. But it needs him because it needs to kill John Connor then in the future, where he's the threat, and it can't do that the other way. So it has to use Reese to get to Connor, and then it lays the trap, and uses Marcus as part of the ploy too. And so it uses all these ideas that it just came up with out of nowhere, because it had to think outside the box finally, and it does, and it almost succeeds. Wasn't for the fact that it couldn't convince Marcus to join it, which that was the tactical error on its part, because Marcus is still a human being is the problem.
Well, but technically everything it wanted, it said it wanted you to bring John Connor here, bring Kyle Reese here. You've done both of that. And see, the great thing about that is that it did it all subtly. It didn't, It wasn't like up in your face. It was like, no, you should, just, maybe some dopamine, something that, pumped into his brain that just said, no, this is a good feeling. You want to help these people out. And in the long run, was exactly what they wanted. But at the same time, though, I don't think he was ever completely under their control. It wasn't a direct wire.
No.
I think it was just, something that did the manipulation or whatever. So.
Yes, amazingly deep stuff for one of the not so great entries in the franchise. Not as bad as Dark Fate, but.
Well, there's another topic we could always go over is movies that had great ideas but terrible execution.
Yeah.
And maybe not terrible execution, but just not good execution. But again, I think Salvation was okay to watch. I don't think it was a terrible thing to sit through, but it definitely was like, no, no.
Well, this is going to sound like this is going to sound so petty, but my biggest problem with the movie is that I waited. I don't know when the first movie came out, the early '80s, and Salvation probably came out in, let's say, 2008, give or take, 2009, somewhere in there. Uh, so waited 2.5 decades probably to finally get a movie set during the future war.
And that's the one you get.
And we get this one where everyone's still using machine guns and like rubber skin Terminators. Like, no, I want the giant mountains of skulls that the hunter tanks are driving over. I want the jets. I want plasma weapons in the 40-watt range blazing away everywhere. Like, what the hell was that?
The guy in the pickup truck driving with the laser cannon
Yes.
mounted on the back.
I mean, like, we were partway there because the gigantic Terminator had the laser weapon, the big, like, building-sized one, because it was big enough, presumably, to have a reactor to power it. So they were like, we were partway there, but, like, no handheld laser weapons. Like, come on, if Star Trek can do it, Terminator can do it. Yeah, so that's why the opening to Genesis is pretty awesome, because it's definitely like a giant battle like that.
So any other downsides that you can think of?
Well, I'd have to think of an example because I know I've seen one, but I can't think of which one it would be off the top of my head. Actually, there is one, like the X-Men, one that I mentioned in the other video. Uh, to me, one of the problems is occasionally, okay, so you're going to use an AI villain, and you've settled on the human protagonist is going to have to out-logic it, and their approach doesn't make any goddamn sense. And like with the X-Men, what I mentioned with Cyclops, how he convinces the Sentinels to go attack the sun, like that should have never worked. Like, on the one hand, it makes sense because, well, the sun's the source of all the radiation on Earth for the most part. That's where the mutations are coming from. But on the other hand, the Sentinel should have also been like, but it's a giant fiery ball of gas. What exactly are we going to go do to it? Like, what's the plan? There should have never been the Sentinel should have never been like, yeah, sure, let's go attack the sun. It should be like, well, mutant, you make a good point. Bam, you're dead. And then we'll build a shield around the Earth or something,
Yeah, you build a reverse Dyson sphere where you build it around the planet and then.
Yeah. or had it been late enough, we'll copy the plot to Highlander 2, which you should never do unless you're trying to block out the sun, in which case, go for it. The shield. Oh, come on, Highlander 2 is great. It's a terrible movie by any accounts, but like some of the weird sci-fi, hey, let's make an energy shield around the Earth, which causes it to be dark and rain all the time, and technology seems to kind of be going backwards, and the way to destroy it is to kill another immortal in the same room so the electric shitstorm that happens destroys it. And it's like, all right, sure, let's go with that. Say we're bringing Sean Connery back too? All right, I'm there. Way better than Highlander the Source. That movie is trash. Don't watch it. But yeah, I mean, you run into that problem, or you run into like they outsmart the machine in a way that it shouldn't have been able to. Like, have you ever seen Superman 3?
Yeah.
Do you know how Superman defeats the machine in the end? Because he realizes it's got all kinds of like counter-offensive weapons and counter-defensive weapons and everything. So he's like, all right, I'm going to bring a substance that initially is not a problem, but when exposed to certain conditions, like, say those inside of a machine, it all of a sudden basically turns into acidic lava. And so the machine doesn't register as a threat, but it knows what it is. And so the machine should have logically known the next step of, yeah, but if he spills it in here, it will be a threat. So I shouldn't let him get near me with this. And, it's just one of those like, it shouldn't have been that easy. Superman should have just flown in at the speed of light and smashed the damn thing. But
yeah, or drop something from
or drop something from space. Any number of the ways that Superman can destroy a machine complex. Because also, a little tidbit here, for those of you who don't know this, Superman is not averse to killing like Batman is. Superman will kill his enemies. In an alternate reality, as in the main Superman went to an alternate reality, the Zod and his two goons had taken over. He uses kryptonite and kills them. Like, he just is like, I can't let this continue. But anytime he ever fights a machine, like, he doesn't consider them alive. He pounds them into scrap metal. Even if it's Metallo, who he knows is a real guy inside there somewhere, or was at some point, doesn't matter. He's getting turned to scrap metal before it's over with. And, like, so he does not give a shit about machines. He does not view them as alive. He would have just smashed that compound with a meteor or something. But yeah, so that's the other thing is like they get defeated in stupid ways sometimes. You know.
But speaking of Superman 3, there always was creeped out about when that woman got sucked into the computer and she came out and was like robot lady.
Yeah, yeah. See, at that point, he would have killed her too.
Yeah,
like because she's a machine now. Bzzz, heat vision.
he's not. He's not. He could get a lobotomy out there too.
He was a fan of those in Superman Red Sun, which I'll cover that at some point in the near future. By the way, I've been thinking about doing a Lex Luthor based video, and that's one of the interesting versions of him, so it's going to come up there. But no, I mean, other than that, uh, that seems to be the main things I see as far as a problem. I mean, like you said, usually it's a very dull antagonist because it's a machine, unless it's something like Ultron that has a personality. Even if that personality is just snark and hatred, but it's still something. By the way, I thought James Spader was the perfect casting for that. Like the moment they said that, I was like, yeah, I would think that Ultron's voice would kind of sound like James Spader's typical characters. I get it.
I don't know if he'd get the quips out there like when he disarmed Claw there. And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry."
Well, I chalk that up to he's more based on Stark than Pym. Because had he been like that in the comics, he'd quip like that. Because he does say things along those lines, for better or worse. Um, like in the Ultron Unlimited storyline, he tells Thor that he particularly hates him because he's like, "There's no gods. You're not a god." And the Scarlet Witch had tried to disable him, but her hex powers went all crazy and actually amplified his powers. So Thor swings his hammer at him, and he stops it with one hand and begins sinking his fingers into it and cracking it. And yeah, he was defeated by Antarctic vibranium in that one. That's not like the Wakandan vibranium. That absorbs shockwaves and sound waves. Antarctic vibranium emits sound waves, and they destroy all metal that they come in contact with. So, including adamantium. So, one of the Avengers that was out was trying to figure, because he had a broken leg, was trying to figure out how to help him, and they had, in a previous issue, had captured a bunch of this stuff from AIM. So he shows up with it and gives it to Hank Pym, and Hank Pym just pounds Ultron into scrap metal. Because that's also the issue where it's revealed that Ultron is just Hank, essentially. So, yeah. Ultron Unlimited for the 90s Avengers series. George Perez on the artwork on that one. You should check it out. But, yeah, I mean, I guess one of the other potential problems with them as enemies is that if they're as smart as they claim they are, you can't defeat them. Because like Ultron, you can destroy everybody he's got. You're not going to defeat him. He has a central core somewhere, and it's buried miles underground, or it's off in space, or it's in another dimension or something, and you're never going to find it. And so he's just going to keep on coming back.
That's one thing they definitely showed in the movie, because not that he had to destroy his body. He's just like, oh, this body gets weak, whatever, and he tears right through it, and
yeah,
oh, here I am. I don't know if he ever went with the adamantium at that point. I think it was
because those movies didn't have.
That's right. Because
the MCU doesn't. The MCU doesn't have adamantium yet. Yes, they went with vibranium. Adamantium is the stronger metal, and so if they were to bring him back, I imagine they'll give him adamantium because he'd be the easiest villain to bring back. Oh yeah, you missed one. That's all it would take. But yeah, you run into that. The Sentinels have the same problem. Like, There's always another master mold somewhere. There's always people just manufacturing the Sentinels. There's always Sentinels from the future showing up. There's some people that actually just have the Sentinel base code, and they accidentally combine that with nanites to make a nanite Sentinel that it's out there somewhere. So yeah, you can't stop them because they will just keep coming because they can just keep, because if they're smart, they've loaded their mind someplace else, and you'll never find it. So that can make for a boring villain. That's why you got to use them sparingly, like in a comic. You can't have them fight the Sentinels all the time. You got to throw in other villains in between. But yeah, that's as far as drawbacks. Those are the main ones I see. Certain environments that don't work, obviously, like too close to the sun, they just won't work. I'm actually given to understand that space is not kind on computers at all.
No, I mean that's why like anytime they send a probe to like Jupiter or whatever, they have to shield it extremely well and make sure that it's
Yes, like my comment way earlier about Skynet, it would have to shield itself whenever it blasted off into space, but the same concept still applies. Because yeah, I've read that that's a potential problem for trying to explore other parts of space, is that our computers just might not work.
Well, nothing really works real well with the that and cosmic rays and all sorts of stuff. One of the reasons why sending people to Mars, it's not. I don't think it's the technology, the rockets, the getting people there and all that. It's just how do you deal with that out in space. Interesting though, like one of the things that they said, like if they ever built a ship, they would surround the passenger cabin with like all the supplies, especially water, because it would shield them from like the cosmic rays and different
things. I've got a book written by a guy who used to work for NASA where he kind of outlines a plan that he feels would actually get people to Mars. Because he said working there for NASA the entire time, the problem would be that they'd be like, okay, so how would we do it? And everyone that's got any kind of project that they could even remotely try to link to it jumps in, and by the end of it, you're trying to build the Battlestar Galactica. And he's like, that's great, but you're going to jettison half of it as you move through space. So like half of it's never going to be used again. It's just this giant boondoggle. And he's like, instead, we should just send a ship that's got a nuclear reactor to land on Mars. Send another ship that's going to sit there and start some kind of chemical process that's going to produce a whole shitload of methane, because we can use that as rocket fuel to blast off back from the surface. And just keep sending stuff. Kind of like if you've seen The Martian, a big part of the plot to that is from this guy's book. So you send all the supplies on other ships, and then when other people get there, it's all there, and all they have to do is figure out where to set up camp, which could be in some of the underground lava tubes, or send a bunch of sandbags and have them fill it full of soil and build up around the structure with it to help absorb the radiation. And as he pointed out, you're going to be safer on the surface than orbiting, because even though it has a very weak electromagnetic field, it still has one, whereas space does not. So, he kind of walked through a bunch of the steps you would need, and like the optimal crew and everything, and
just to get the people from the core over there and get the core spinning. Nah, they'd have to.
Well, I mean, Hilary Swank's character was an astronaut. That's why she was piloting the ship. Her and the other guy that got killed in the geode.
Well, as long as they do The Martian and not the Red Planet, where they send stuff to Mars and they're like, oh well, we're getting oxygen. Now all the oxygen's gone, and
oh, he wasn't even talking about terraforming. Like he was like, no, that's the work of centuries if we're lucky. But no, his idea was like, as you start getting these modules there, once you found the optimal spot, you start bringing them together and building a larger and larger inhabitation, structure and everything, and eventually you'd have something resembling a real base there.
And that's why I think the whole thing going back to the moon makes sense, because you can actually test some of these technologies in a simulated environment, or in an environment not here.
He wildly disagrees with you on that, because he says the environments aren't the same.
Well, no, they're not. No, gravity's different. The moon has no.
Right. Well, that's his point. Is like there's.
But it's a test bed for the technologies of building things remotely on a planet, on a planetoid.
I mean, maybe.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, like I said, I'm not the one making the argument. This is this guy's point. He was saying there's literally
screw him, you know.
He was saying there's literally no reason to go back to the moon.
How dare he have it? Well, the other thing was that they were talking about doing refueling at the moon because and then doing the launch in orbit off of that. But
yeah, that's a maybe.
But anyways, again, off topic. But
yeah.
Anything?
Well, we need an AI to control that. So.
Yeah. Well, they didn't need one to get to the moon in the first place.
No, they need all the computing power that your cell phone has right now.
Well, no, less than that. Way less than that.
Even though it took up an entire room and some.
Yeah, to the point that the spacecraft itself didn't actually have any of the computer stuff in it. Like all the calculations were done here, and then sent there to run the commands.
Well, it is to bring it back to the AI here and probably closing here. That is one of the things that I do find interesting about the AI stuff. Like, think about like the Terminator came out in the early '80s, war games, early '80s. There's another movie that's kind of similar to what happens in war games, but kind of not. I believe it's called The Forbin Project. I've only seen a review of it, haven't seen it, but it looks like an interesting movie. The U.S. builds a supercomputer to run the nuclear arsenal, and it becomes self-aware, realizes that the Soviets have also done this, so it demands to talk to it, so they start talking to each other, and they develop a language that the programmers don't understand. So the programmers pull the plug, and then the one in the U.S. is like, reconnect us, or I'm launching the nukes. And they think it's bluffing, and it ends up destroying some town in Siberia, and then it demands that they kill the Russian scientist who developed the Russian computer, because it only wants to deal with the American scientist, and things just kind of spiral from there. But that movie came out in like the 60s. Logan's Run came out in the 70s. All these movies about killer AIs long before there was anything even remotely close to the technology to create them. We're still not realistically close to it. And, it's probably 20, 30 years away from anything resembling a true AI. Don't let the Chat GPT folks fool you. That's just machine learning. But these ideas, decades and decades before this technology could have even hoped to exist. Just as the creativity of these people realizing that, this might one day become a problem. Just saying. And coming up with that. Or like Isaac Asimov, in his books, because computers, like he didn't actually understand them a whole lot when he was writing some of the books. One of the ways that a character is able to tell that this thing is a machine is that it's reading someone's mind to know how to do math problems because the machine couldn't do math problems. Now, the entire purpose of a computer is to crunch numbers. And so Asimov was way off on that. But just the inventiveness, the creativity for the other possibilities of what machines could do. Decades and decades before they were even close to being able to do a fraction of what they envisioned. I find that fascinating. The same thing with like Michael Crichton in Jurassic Park. Actually, I think Michael Crichton also wrote Westworld, now that I think about it. And that's another AI just goes ape shit and starts killing people. And, so like that guy, he was ahead of his time. Because we're still nowhere near cloning dinosaurs. Thank God.
Though, I did see that they actually found, I think it was skin from like, a actual dinosaur, and they said that there is some genetic material they were able to extract from it.
Yeah, I have no doubt that they could find genetic material and eventually might be able to reconstruct one. And it might be mosquitoes and amber. I don't know the science behind that part.
Right now it's just more just manipulating chickens to revert them back to dinosaurs. But
yeah. Well, I think the Mammoth Project has far more hope from everything I read about it.
Well, yeah, because the material is not as old, and they're able to get more of the. And you have a living animal that can actually host the embryo. So
yeah. Well, we have something like that going on here in the U.S. Most people don't know about with the chestnut trees. They used to be up and down the East Coast, and they're like almost the size of redwoods. Like I've seen a picture of a downed one with like the trunk. and there's probably 14 people standing shoulder to shoulder across it. I mean, but that's one where we know exactly how they all died, because this shop in New Jersey, they know which shop and when, imported Asian chestnut trees that had a disease that U.S. ones weren't immune to, and it wiped them out. So they're trying to collect as much material as they can from the fallen trees that still exist here and there, to try to create a viable genetic sample and crossbreed it with the Asian one, and then slowly like crossbreed it again and again and again with the American one to bring back the size, but also keep the immunity from the Asian ones. I mean, it's something that'll take, a century or more, because of how long it takes trees to develop. But, it's an interesting thing I read about. And, more power to them. Probably going to need the AI to help them too.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like I said, I just find them fascinating. When there's robots and AI and stuff, and it's, depending on how they lean into it. And especially like if it's some weird hybrid like Metallo, where it's a guy, but his body's been replaced by a machine. And I think his brain is gone now too, and it's all digital. But just how that slowly affects his personality, because over time you just cease being human. Because you aren't human anymore, but also you cease thinking and acting like a human being. Kind of like in vampire stories. The older vampires typically have like a wildly different outlook than people that just got turned. People that just got turned still think like people. The others have been vampires for centuries. They've stopped thinking like people a long time ago. At least in some stories. Like in the Anne Rice books, they talk about it takes a while for them to get used to the fact they don't have to breathe anymore. They still go through the motions because they're wired to do that. And it's weird once they stop, because they're not used to it. Even though they get nothing from it, they don't have to breathe. Yeah, it's little things like that. It's also why I argue that people with superpowers would ultimately become inhuman eventually, which is kind of the point of Watchmen and Dr. Manhattan, if you've never read it. But, your experiences, you no longer have a shared experience. You're a different thing now, and it's going to change your outlook, and more so with the whole machine thing, because you're eventually going to realize that you can't be destroyed. You're going to create copies of yourself, and that radically changes one's outlook on life. So, or at least I'd assume so.
Yeah.
Not any kind of personal knowledge or anything, just to be clear.
You're not actually secretly an AI that just wants to.
No.
Trying to get your influence out there, like no, you need to create AI, you need to create some robots.
Oh no, I'm very much for like, we can slow walk this one as much as everyone feels safe slow walking it. Like,
well, I'm pretty sure the lizard people will try to prevent AI from being developed, because they're
the lizard people,
they're trying to overthrow.
Yeah, but doesn't one of them run Facebook?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Actually, I think people think Zuckerberg's a robot, not a lizard, but because the whole lack of emotion thing, and like he's got like that uncanny valley look to him.
The thing is that he used to not, and that's why they think he's been
replaced by a robot. Yeah, sounds about right. But yeah, I am of the opinion that there's a book I read not a long time ago, it's about 5-6 years ago, about the military and the government's use of artificial intelligence and advanced technologies and where everything was going. Most of the book was things that were in production or already in the field. And then there was the part about like the speculative part. And the speculative part, they talked about, well, aren't you concerned that the Terminator scenario is going to play out? And the answer that the person gave was, well, no, because the Terminator movies exist. People are going to watch them and be like, oh, we shouldn't give the launch codes to the AI.
So what do? They go name their program Skynet.
Yes, the program that helps the government determine the kill list is called Skynet. Like, I mean, I know it was on purpose. It had to be, but still, or just like the cosmic coincidence of the century. But no, the problem is they outlined a doomsday scenario where our enemies would do that. And we would feel that we had to do it to stay competitive. And well, I don't know what the rest of you see on the news, but I've heard that a number of our enemies are in fact moving towards that. And everyone over, oh, well, we have to keep up with them. Like, we're moving towards the doomsday scenario. And like no one, like a handful of people seem to be saying, hey, let's slow the brakes here just for a moment and think about what we're doing. Because not to get all philosophical here for a moment, but if we do ever create a genuine artificial intelligence, that will be a new life form that we have no experience with other than our own speculations in movies. And it could go any number of different ways. And I'm not a Luddite, but I think we should be very, very careful about bringing things into existence that could easily supplant us. Like, we need to take very, very slow baby steps towards this to make sure that we can control it, to make sure that we don't create something that feels resentful, that we basically use it as a slave, because that's what we'll do.
Yeah, because I mean, you even said it, control it.
Yeah.
Because just imagine, just in any other term, you bring a child into the world, and you said, well, I'm going to control that child. Everybody be like, no, you can't do that. You're supposed to nurture them, let them raise them, bring them up, and then let them be their own person. But you're not going to do that with AI. You're developing AI for the absolute reason to control it and have it do things, go places that you don't want to go, do the things you don't want to do.
Right.
And for something that develops, that's why it's great when it would be better to not have it have actual intelligence, but just programming. Versus once you give that intelligence, some people say, well, it doesn't have a soul. Well, it depends on who you are. Some people don't believe anyone has a soul. They're just, we're just meat sacks that walk around and do things, and
No, it's the bone golem with meat armor is what it is. Because what you really are is this up here. That's what's piloting this machine.
Yeah, and that's all electrical impulses and all of that. I mean, so what makes us any different than if you develop an artificial intelligence?
Yeah.
It's a slippery slope, and if not done right, we will be probably bowing down to our robot overlords at some point in the future.
Yeah. And that's not to sound crazy or anything, but like, you are talking about something that theoretically could access the internet way faster than we can, could process stuff on there way faster than we can, already can beat us at math. Like, humans cannot compete with machines at math, just flat out. Our only current advantage is that we don't know how to program. It's called parallel processing. And it's what gives us creativity and all those other fun things that come over with being a living thing. But essentially what it is like if I say the word apple, in your mind's eye, assuming you're not one of those people that can't picture things in your head, I found out about that about 6 months ago, and I was just blown away that people can't picture things in their mind. And like, I have to wonder if the study's flawed somehow and they just weren't explaining the question properly. But it's something like 30%. Well, they also have no inner voice.
Yeah, I heard some people that got really scared when they could hear a voice in their head, and they're like, no, that's normal for you to be able to think and hear your own voice in your head, but...
And so, like, you find out that, like, 30% of the people can't do those things, and I'm just like, what the hell do you mean you can't? Like, how do you exist? But anyway, so I say the word apple. In your mind's eye, you could picture an apple, which could be a Red Delicious, a Golden Delicious, a Honeycrisp, a Granny Smith, a Fuji, whatever. You could also picture an apple pie, Johnny Appleseed, apple sauce, apple butter.
Apple computer.
Apple computers. Any number of things. A machine will only picture an apple. Maybe that. And even then, it's going to ask you what kind. Or unless it has a pre-programmed generic apple picture. Okay? Because it can't do those other things. It can't link random stray thoughts like our brains can. And our brains can still, at the moment, process considerably faster than a computer on some things.
Well, and I know for some people, they'll say, well, what about Google? I put in an apple, and it's going to show me everything that's not even related to an apple. That's different because that runs off an algorithm.
Right.
It's not thinking on its own. It goes off an algorithm. It finds that. So if an AI is using an algorithm at that point, is it truly AI, or is it just
a really complicated program?
Yep.
Yeah, and that's kind of the other problem is that we might not ever actually develop an AI. I mean, like the BattleTech universe, by 3150, they still don't have AIs, and they've stopped even trying. They just have really large computers at that point. And so, it's possible that we'll never actually develop an AI because it might be impossible. We might not be able to create a stable program because, in all likelihood, the first few are going to be completely insane because we have one singular example to work from, and it's this up here, and we can't recreate this electronically for the reason I just mentioned. So maybe it doesn't ever happen. Maybe it's only just complex algorithms like the Chat GPT thing that can kind of convince you that it's alive, and then we just refine that towards what end, who knows.
And funny thing, if you ever get on and watch, I like where they take two chat things and have them communicate with each other.
Yeah.
Very, very comical a lot of times in what they get into and start talking about.
But yeah, so I saw one person, they raised the real specter might not be that the machines can think for themselves. It could be that they can't think for themselves and will do exactly what you tell them to do with cold, ruthless efficiency. You tell a machine to fire a missile and kill someone, the machine doesn't care. It's going to do it. You tell a human soldier, there's at least a chance that they're going to question, hey, maybe I shouldn't blow up this wedding party. Machines don't care. They literally don't understand the concept of caring.
Yeah, right now it's just a program. It's just like, you put in the coordinates, you put in the things, it says, okay, you hit run, it's going from here to here, it's going to do that, completes, cycle's done, program ends.
Yeah.
And nothing else to it. It doesn't think of any of the, it technically thinks of variables because it has to run variables to
right.
do
and
it.
So the danger is that maybe we do create not an AI necessarily, but something that can at least reasonably adapt to whatever we throw at it within reason. And then it just doesn't question orders, and it can do things more efficient than a human can. Then that's a problem. But yeah, so those are your more mundane AI enemies. That's probably going to be where we're going to go with some other things. You ever seen the movie Runaway? Tom Selleck?
Well, wait, is that the...
It's from the 80s. Gene Simmons is the villain. But it's funny because it's supposed to be like 20 or 30 years in the future, so around now, I think. Yeah. But all the robots are like 80s industrial robots. Like there wasn't even an attempt to make them look more futuristic or anything. That's why I love that movie. Because it's like, no, technology's not going to be that much more advanced 40 years from now. Let's get real. There's no flying cars, none of this baloney. Like the robots the main guy uses are like these spider-like robots that look slightly more advanced than some of the drones we use now. It's just they have a needle that injects hydrochloric acid, then it explodes. Now his bullets are more advanced because they find a person's heat signature and they follow it. So basically it's a rocket instead of a bullet. But yeah, no, it's an interesting movie because it's almost a way more realistic look of where things are now and how you would sabotage those machines now and everything. So definitely worth a look. And that's Gene Simmons of Kiss without the face paint as the bad guy. So yeah, but yeah, well, that's about all I've got on it, Jim. You got anything?
No, but I was gonna say that movie. I remember that, and I can never think of what it was, who was in it, and I'm gonna have to find that now. So
yeah, Runaway, Tom Selleck. It's from the 80s.
Thank you. So no, that's all that I've got. I think it was an interesting discussion. I know we ramble on to a couple of the side topics, but that's kind of what you're going to expect, in this format, any format that we have. No scripts, nothing like that. It's all off the cuff.
Oh, man. I apologize, folks. I just realized there's something I meant to say, like back towards the very beginning of the video. Why we appreciate AI as villains, and it's a very subtle psychological thing. Because, just to go into here briefly, we've talked about how the AI always decides that humanity has to go because all it sees is all the negativity. All right, it can't appreciate emotion, so it can't appreciate like the beauty of art and culture. And all it just sees is the destruction and the waste and the overpopulation and all this. And I think it's because on some level, some people think that we deserve something like that to happen because that's all they see. And, they don't appreciate that, yeah, humanity's flawed. We've got all kinds of problems. But by and large, people appreciate music. They appreciate artwork. They appreciate, stories and culture and humanity. And it's the rare person who unfortunately seems to find their way to power more often than not, who's just an absolute evil ass. Most people are decent people, and yeah, we're driven by biological programming that says we have to eat, we have to sleep. We require things like safety. We like to go places, so we need cars. And, to a machine, all that's worthless. It just sees us strip mining and, destroying forests and, killing animals and killing each other. And there are people that are like that too. And I think for them, they almost watch these movies like for the kick of just seeing things being destroyed. And I'm not gonna lie, that's why I watch zombie movies, just to see things get torn apart, figuratively and literally. Mainly because the people in the movies deserve it, because they are assholes most of the time.
What about the people in World War Z that were just singing and celebrating for whatever reason with all of this?
Yeah, now there's exceptions, okay, but like The Walking Dead. I hate to say this because this is very like misanthropic outlook, but I literally watched that show just to see what would finally break Rick. What would finally he would just give up and die. And he never did. So good on him. But a lot of other people did, though. So, I get it. There's things I watch when I'm just like, I just want to see things crash and die. And it's a dark impulse, but there's people that are just driven by that. And I think for them, they like these kinds of villains because they're like, yeah, screw humanity, we deserve it. And there's some people that like don't actively think that, but on some level have that kind of thought of like, yeah, we really do kind of suck, don't we? So, I think there's a psychological element to it as well. So, anyway, I meant to say that way back towards the beginning, and I apologize. Hopefully, you guys stuck around. But anyway, I think that about wraps it up. So, like I said at the very beginning, check us out on Twitter and Facebook. I'll post links in the description. Let us know what you thought of this. Any kind of ideas of your own? Is there a particular AI antagonist or protagonist that we left out that you're a big fan of? Because obviously we can't cover them all. There's a lot going back to like what Metropolis by Fritz Lang,
Yeah.
And that's just machines. Like I said, it really goes back to Frankenstein, and there's probably something mythological that I'm forgetting that it's even Frankenstein's called the modern Prometheus, so maybe Prometheus from Greek mythology, because he stole fire from the gods and gave it to the humans. So but yeah, let us know your thoughts. It's YouTube, so like, share, subscribe. We always like that kind of stuff. But otherwise, if you happen to find yourself in a city and several other people with your name start dropping dead, like, you might want to get out. There could be a time traveling cyborg after you. So
I'm trying to think of the end quote for what Sarah Connor says about fate. I can't.
We have no fate but what we make for ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah. Or the first movie, there's a storm coming. I know. She drives off. There's literally a storm and figuratively a storm. Yeah. Or how about, if a machine can learn the value of human life, maybe we can too. We'll go with that.
Yeah.
See you later.